All right, thank you for joining us today. I am Jacqueline Melnick. I'm a senior crypto reporter at TechCrunch, and I just figured everyone could introduce themselves. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brian Johnson. I'm a partner at Republic Capital. I focus on the crypto and the gaming side of the fund.
Mark Stanwyck. I'm one of the co-founders of Avalanche. Avalanche does public fundraising and incubation for projects in the Avalanche ecosystem.
Avalanche. I'm Greg Gottman. I'm the CMO of Anchor and KR. We're an infrastructure company that helps most blockchains out there run their node infrastructure, and we also have a gaming SDK that takes Web2 games and really easily ports them over to Web3. We also offer like a subnet as a service offering, and so a lot of games have come to us recently to help them port their games over, and we also cut checks. So we see a lot of things, I would say.
I guess to start, because you guys all come from like different angles and sectors of the crypto market, can you give like a general overview or thesis of like how you invest in like Web3 games?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Keep it short though.
Yeah. We, on our side, we're, even in the bull market, we were very careful on the gaming side. We felt that the market was very saturated and still pretty much is. On our side, we were really focused on where we saw the big studios coming in and what would be the infrastructure that they would adopt. That's why we got really excited about subnets, is the merge, and or I would say the marriage of public chains and private chains, and the use of that infrastructure on the subnet level is, I think, very attractive to these studios that really want to control their IP more so in a private environment where they can kind of decide what goes on, what's has to, can go off chain or go, say bridge to Ethereum and so forth, and basically the user-friendly experience too, because crypto is very, I would say it has a high learning curve. It's very scary to the new users. I remember when I first got into crypto, it was a very new world, and just the private key aspect was very scary with different chains, and trying out all that stuff was definitely a high learning curve. And so making that easier through the subnet level at least is making it so gamers don't have to pay for transaction fees or worry about their private keys, I think is very attractive to those studios. And so that's one of the aspects that we look for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Focusing on the larger game producers and some like historical momentum there. The GameFi is interesting because it's one of these things that at this point feels very commonplace, but in the grand scheme of things, at this level, it's not that old. So there's been a quick evolution of the way these things are being built and who's building them. So originally, we were looking at and interested in teams that seemed to be really curious about some of the problems that presented themselves earlier on. So teams that seem to be very invested in looking at the little hindsight that we had and saying, how are we going to think about this in new and interesting ways, right? Because the in-game economies became problematic quickly. So that was one part of it. And then as time progressed, you did see more traditional players start to move in, and that was obviously very exciting. That kind of validation. So we do try and focus on that stuff as well. But because it's so new, again, overarching kind of thesis for us is who is aware of and really excited about solving problems that we know are already present. And that seems like a strong place to start to work from.
Yeah, very similar. We take a evolving with the market approach, and so when anything's hitting, we're on board with it. As things start to fall apart, we're off board with it. And so, like in the beginning, when gaming, it was just so exciting. People come to us mostly because they need help with their infrastructure. And so we become very strategic investors if we feel like we can strategically help them and help them with our relationships with all the different blockchains, with our relationships with exchanges, with our, if we're going to be their node provider and a lot of their infrastructure provider, we're happy to take a deep partnership with them with these games. And we were, I'd say, much more fluid with the games early on as the whole industry was booming. And then as things started to tighten up, you tighten up as well. And so I think that we don't take probably as many bets as the larger VCs and take as big of checks, but we cut 50 to 250, and we take a very hands-on approach with our kids. The games that we let in. Yeah, and it's worked out pretty well so far. I mean, hopefully we'll see where things go from here.
I guess because the current market has been a little bit crazy recently, has there been any change for any of you three for your investment strategies? Are there certain Web3 games you're looking to invest in now that you weren't in the past? And what's kind of the dynamic now? Has it shifted?
I can start. On our side, it hasn't really shifted at all. We were very careful in our thesis on this side. We see on our side, just from we have our advisory arm and then we have our capital arm, and just on those two alone, we'll see maybe 100 or so projects a month, and many of those are games and metaverses, and I would say 1 out of 100 makes it to the next step on our side, and really, looking at just how history has played out in gaming, especially, I think it's sort of playing out the same way that it did in the 80s, where you had this huge concentration of different games. The market was super saturated with a bunch of different consoles. Atari had 5 different consoles, and there was the, I'm drawing a blank right now, but Sega had 3 different other ones, and it was a boom and a bust. And what saved gaming back then was protection of IP by Nintendo and requiring that they had these chips in their cartridges. And so they basically consolidated, one console, the Famicom and the Nintendo Entertainment System, and basically licensing out their IP. So you could, they basically decided who built on their console, and then you had the huge growth in the industry that we see today. I think it's all playing out the same way here in crypto. You have, I've seen a couple projects where founders just have no experience in the gaming space, and maybe they're on their roadmap is looking to hire a dev from the gaming side, and those are really just too risky for us on our side. So we look really, at the end of the day, crypto and traditional investing kind of are the same at the seed stage, where you really look at the founders. You look at the market, you look at their roadmap and what's their strategy, their history, and you really just play it out there. Also, is the game going to be fun? Is in the market side of things, gaming sort of has this trend following where zombies are hip for a time, dinosaurs are hip for a time, creative games are hip. So it's what is the trend following to, and are they, too late? Are they too early? Or, if we had to guess, where is that trend going? So, having that all play out, and really just also, working closely with the founders is putting that huge recipe together is really how we decide on our side. It's a lot, but it's worked out on our side for the most part.
So the question related to where we're at in the market and if we are looking at things differently, I mean, yes, because you kind of have to. The conditions sort of force you to pay more close attention, sort of whether you like it or not, right? Everyone just kind of tightens up. So there's always that element to it. But bull or bear or more neutral conditions, with gaming in particular, again, we have some benefit of history and hindsight now. So more so than the market, the bar is just going up with the gaming, and that's what we're paying attention to, and it's kind of independent of the market. So we do consider, the appetite of retail and valuations and things like that, that does change some because better markets can take care of a lot of stuff for you. You know, whether that's, you know, good or bad is a different question. But we have not changed much, except we have more information now about games, you know, and what people are responding to and what people like, and more people coming into the space that do have more experience and that are smart and creative, and, you know, so just more opportunity to look at it in different ways, and it just feels sort of removed from the market in that way.
Yeah, so I think our thesis from the beginning has been always that like gaming will be a huge part of this industry, and it will be something that hits the industry faster than, you know, the metaverse, which we see is a little bit further out there. DeFi kind of already hit, and will probably hit, but gaming's going to be the next big growth market. We still believe that pretty inherently. We don't really see a lot of people in Web3 that know gaming, and we don't see a lot of Web2 gaming people that understand Web3. And so we spent a lot of effort. We've been working on it for close to like 8 months now on this like Web2 to Web3 SDK. It plugs right into Unity, Unreal, works in the dev environment, and allows Web2 game designers to build Web3 games, ideally with, you know, us helping them along the way too. And that's where, you know, we're a dev tooling company. That's what we do. And so that thesis we still hold pretty strong to as well. Valuations have come down just as market cycles come down. That stuff's just kind of normal in the industry, and that will go back up. But what we've really seen is, like, in the beginning, people got away with a lot of these fuzzier tokenomics, same as in DeFi, where we just, you know, we just had such a wild bull market that like anything goes, and it's kind of fun, and like everyone wins, and WAGMI is like the thing, and, you know, everyone's just like money in the air everywhere. But now, you know, in the game design that we're seeing and the people we're talking to, the tokenomics look much different. It's a lot more about making a much less inflationary in-game token. There's a lot of thought process that goes into exactly like what's for purchase, what's not for purchase, the dual economy system. And so that product market fit of the tokenomics, as well as the fun gameplay, is like the two things that we're still seeing get flushed out right now. And like we're there for it, but we're not like the best at it. We're exploring it as well. But in general, the core thesis of like gaming being the next major driver for this industry is we still believe pretty inherently on.
I remember when I first started like covering Web3 gaming, Axie Infinity was like the massive game that everyone references all the time. And at the time it was like, oh, you could have a whole salary covering or playing their game. And now, as you all know, it's plummeted. I guess what about that made the game, one, so appealing, and two, fail? And then as investors in the space, what are you looking at to make sure that doesn't happen with something you're investing in?
Yeah, for Axie Infinity, it was a first mover advantage, I'd say. I mean, there were other games as well, but it was the one that definitely took off. And it was definitely in the peak, or no, I'm sorry, the beginning of the bull cycle. And so it kind of rode that wave from our standpoint, and really just from the get-go, you could see that the token economics were broken. In terms of just what gamers want and what gamers love is just, you know, that barrier to entry to not be there. And with Axie Infinity, at one point I think it was $3,000 just to play the game. I mean, if anyone thinks that that is a sound model, I think you have to reassess just, you know, your outlook on this stuff. And it wasn't sustainable, and you really, if you looked under the hood, you could see that yes, it was bringing people out of poverty. It was a great story, but it wasn't sustainable, and you just had no one in the middle actually just playing the game for fun. You had the whales on one side buying up all the SPL from the farmers. You had the guilds just farming it up like crazy, farming up the Axie NFTs, and it just, you know, it had to come crumbling down at some point, and just, you know, it did. And so the way we avoid that on our side, we have our advisory arm where we have a partnership with a JV with FTX and Galaxy, where we help build some of these games and these token economics out. And actually, one thing that we do recommend sometimes to these games, these developers and these studios is like, you know, do you actually need a token sometimes? Would you just need an NFT marketplace? Because at the end of the day, like, does your token, does your game need a token? And so that's one thing we asked, like maybe you should launch the game first before launching a token and see if it all plays out, and just have your NFT marketplace, and maybe you just accept USDC for your NFTs as well. And I mean, we have a couple games that we're working on that are coming out. One is a battle royale that actually has that model, and another one actually is launching a sort of mini game. So there actually is a utility with their token before they launch, say on Xbox and PlayStation, which they plan to do next year. So really helping out, being really hands-on with our portfolio companies as well, making sure that those mistakes don't happen, because we know, have an idea of what works right now, and it's all an experiment still. It's still super early, but definitely you can see, learn from the failures.
Yeah, so Axie's an interesting one because it's one that everyone knows and kind of kicked all this stuff off. But I think like inadvertently kind of set the wrong frame for gaming in general, and like the expectations of what crypto games should be. So the people playing Axie, in the beginning, they might not have been gamers. They were just people that happened to be in crypto looking for yield and things to do. And if Axie hadn't come along at that point, it's likely they would have just been doing something else in crypto, right? So I think it had this sort of side effect of establishing a really, really funny frame and expectation of these games, which, like Brian pointed out, everyone could see what wasn't sustainable. So when it comes to solving that, I guess, I think it's more about a better understanding of the way players actually need to and should be rewarded for a game to be fun and different than what you might see in Web2. And the way they built the token and the inflation had, all of these teams thereafter trying to crack this problem. And I'm not sure that solving that problem actually achieved the goal that they really needed to achieve, which was maybe building better games that were only marginally better than Web2 in terms of the rewards and things like that. So more so than how are we going to fix making sure that everyone gets their mortgage every month and the game stays sustainable. It's like looking at what do we really expect from these games, and what do we need from them to drive Web3 gaming forward.
Yeah, I think that Axie served its purpose really well. It brought GameFi to the masses, which is what it was supposed to do. It was an innovative new thing for everyone. It made a dual token system, which was awesome. We think gaming guilds never made sense to us. We've always kind of been like, this just as a whole thing for the ecosystem doesn't make sense. We think they die. They only work in unsustainable models like what Axie had with the $3,000 entry point. And the future of this is, as we see it, and again, we don't think that there's a lot of Web 2 people that understand Web 3, and there's not a lot of Web 3 people that understand gaming, and so there's this middle ground that still needs help. So we work very hard on trying to build developer tools that make it seamless for these Web 2 games to be into Web 3. And those are also the games we want to invest in, where people don't really realize they're playing a Web 3 game until at some point they're able to realize how much money is in their account and cash it out in some way, and then it's like a big thing. We're not sure what that looks like at the moment, but what we think, the way Axie did it was just basically brute force, just going to play a bunch and you're going to earn money this way. We don't think that's actually what it looks like. Our core belief is it's going to look something more competitive. There's going to be tournament style, where there's a big tournament, good players can earn money. I don't think gaming is going to be everyone who plays gets rich. I think it's going to be good players get rich. And so the tournament model we see now in in these large stadiums and stuff like that with professional gamers and stuff like that, people will be able to earn the same kind of thing from home with good tokenomics, and potentially maybe even some betting infrastructure on top of it, which we think would be really fun in the future. And so we're looking to invest in that as well.
Yeah, I guess going off of that, that was going to be my next question. Kind of obviously games over time, they update, they change, they take out elements, they put new ones in, or they keep certain foundational parts to it. But what are some aspects that you expect to see in these future Web3 games?
Ooh, In the future, I would say, I mean, it's tough to predict, but I do see the private chains playing out more so, where the studios have control over it and protect the users and protect the gamers. On the betting side, we've invested in a couple different betting D-apps or games that involve betting, and like Zedrun, for instance. They're actually a client on our side, on the token economic side. And I do see that being played more out in terms of just everyday gambling and casinos as well, like a decentralized casino of sorts. And you can see that playing out in the metaverse too, like where there's games being built inside these metaverses. More so casinos, I think, are the real stickiness and popular ones right now. I think you can see from just the user count of the early ones that they're not very fun, and so there's little to do in there. And so I think it's too early to see how it plays out in terms of the metaverse and just the tech there. And then on the side of I forgot what I was going to say afterwards, but keep going. Maybe I'll remember.
Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday. I'm so tired.
I think Greg made a good point about more skill, entertaining to watch tournament type games. I think that will become bigger. And again, I think there will be some kind of move away from tremendous yields in these games, and you'll start to see people focus on other parts of blockchain and crypto that make new things possible in games. So the way communities can interact directly with teams to create what the game is. Assets owned, by the team. I'm sorry, by the community as a result of their participation in the team, and mechanics and experiences that are only possible on blockchain. So I think more creative thinking around different areas of blockchain outside of return is what I would anticipate we see a lot more of.
So there's this concept in standard gaming that the game isn't as much fun if you could just buy your way to the front, kinda. And so even in like your Farmvilles and things like that, you were just paying for a lot of times like getting like the time getting less. So you could just like, but you still had to put the time in to build. And so in a lot of these crypto games right now with the NFTs, you could just like buy the most powerful NFT and you're immediately like the best player and go in and start killing everyone who like really plays time. And so we think there's going to be, we're playing around a lot right now in the experimentation phase of gaming with the tokenomics and how we play with all these assets and monetize them. And no one knows what they're doing. And everyone's just kind of like just doing what everyone else does. But we do think it goes back towards more traditional gaming and a lot of the mechanics and things that they've figured out that we're not putting forward at the moment yet. And so even though it's going to be play to earn, because we have incentive mechanisms in Web3, which are great, that's what drives the industry. The incentives are going to be more based around good gameplay than based around just any play, and more based around rewarding good gamers than just like anyone who wants to throw money at the game and like beat everyone else. And so like right now we're just kind of in like this like experimentation monetization phase, and then once we have the right product market fit, this is also very similar to how traditional gaming was when free-to-play started. Everyone thought free-to-play was a joke. Traditional gaming industry wasn't into free-to-play. And then like little by little they figured out the product market fit, and then free-to-play ended up being the biggest thing in the traditional gaming now. So we think it probably mirrors very similar to like what happened 10 years ago when the app stores came out.
All right. And I guess one of my last questions for you guys is the common phrase of getting the next billion users into a certain space in crypto. How do we get the next billion users into Web3 gaming? And also, how do you get those Web2 gaming studios to really take this seriously? And I know some of them are currently, but I think there's also a hesitancy among the overall audience. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts, or where does the responsibility lie on this?
Yeah, I think it comes with IP and what gamers are used to, legacy IP that is. So we invested in a recent layer one called Oasis, and basically it was backed by Bandai, Sega, Square Enix, and they're for the first time going to be validators on this chain. And so they're basically, it's basically all the founders are from Japan, and they're all game studio developers. And so they basically all banded together after just 2 years of discussion and decided to just build this chain together, and where it's basically a blend of private and public, where it's an EVM on one side and then rollups on the other. And so it can, bridge to Avalanche or ETH or what have you. And the idea is that they will control these rollups and pay for the rollup fees, and so they feel like they trust it because they can put their IP on it. Say if an NFT gets stolen or something, it's just like Web2, where they can, burn that NFT then and then reimburse the gamer. So they want that unique user experience where they feel like their fans are being taken care of. And so I think you have to, even though there is the push for decentralization, it's a marriage at the end of the day of decentralization and privatization. And I think that's how you get the next billion users on, is where you have, there's thousands of fans of, you name it, Ubisoft is going to be a validator on it. Assassin's Creed has millions and millions of fans. If they build an NFT marketplace or a game that's based on Assassin's Creed and where you own your assets now, I could see a lot of users going over there. And with the roll-up structure that they have, you shouldn't have to worry about transaction fees. And I think that's how you get the next users onboarded. And then afterwards, after they get comfortable, then they try out the degen strats and bridging all over and swapping NFTs and such.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, and I think the responsibility, I think in part, is on the community, in as much as we all take on that with relation to any crypto vertical, doing good work and pushing for actual change and these kinds of things. But I also believe that it falls largely on the game teams and developers to build experiences that rival the really, really popular experiences that have already adopted millions of users. And there is, as we've had the opportunity to work with larger game studios and the incumbents, and it's obvious that there is like a general skepticism and mistrust of crypto and Web3 in general, and chipping away at that and breaking that down is important. And I don't think it's something that needs to happen all at once, and it will probably happen slowly. There's a game that's being built on Avalanche called Shrapnel. And this is, a tried and true AAA first-person shooter. And these guys come from the world of traditional game development, and the way that they're able to put this game together and interact with the community and not do it in a silo, and get real-time feedback and be inspired by that. This is a very different experience for these guys. And so it changes how they work and build. And you have one team like that does that, and I think that can start to inspire a lot of others. So sometimes it just takes one, and you're able to grow and build from that.
Yeah, pretty bullish on Shrapnel. I do think that the game that ends up being the next million user game, the ones that make it through, they do take the community first route. They do take the Web3 first route. I don't think any of these traditional big companies coming in, the Ubisofts and stuff like that, are going to figure it out. Every big company that's come into Web3 for the last, every year for the last 4 or 5 years, they get it wrong. Time and time again, they just do not get how we work. They don't get the whole thing. They think they're smarter than us, and then they fail. They don't connect. And so I think it's going to happen also with traditional gaming companies. The model is different. Our industry is different. And so the one that makes it is going to be one that takes a Web3 first model, community first model, similar to like, Travel, the one that like really builds the community in the Discord, that understands how like tokenomics work, how like building token communities, token launches. Like this is as much a part of running a successful thing on the outside as the gaming part is. And so, as an ethos, the next 1 million, like the big game that we think is going to be a combination of like a founding team from a big gaming studio and also traditional people that have been in Web3 for a while, and like can kind of like bridge the gap and do both to make like a great user experience game, and then make like something that resonates with the crypto community the right way.
Also, I think one thing you're going to see next year with subnets is games launched on Xbox and PlayStation that actually have the blockchain component underneath. I can't say which game it is yet because they're supposed to announce it in August, but there is one that's building a subnet on Avalanche. It's going to plan to launch on Xbox, PlayStation. They've actually talked to Xbox too, and they're actually okay with the blockchain component underneath. I mean, in the end, it's in the settings of the game. So if you want to say go to your hot wallet address, you just type in the settings, what your address is, and they'll send it for you because they control the subnets. So they pay for the fees for whatever you want to send to your hot wallet. So I think in the end, blockchain should, not always, but there are on-chain games, but for the most part on the free-to-play side should be just an afterthought.
It's very cool. I haven't seen a lot of those things
I'll tell
yet.
you which
Console
one.
games,
I'll tell you
yeah.
which one.
Tell me that one, yeah.
All right, great.
It's not shrapnel.
All right, well, Brian, Mark, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today, and thank you everyone else for listening in.
Thanks.